Doctor Who has had a lot of Prime Ministers. In many ways that's not surprising, seeing as how the Earth is threatened by alien invasions on practically a weekly basis, and how these invasions tend to focus for some unknown reason on the United Kingdom. We in the real UK have also been going through a bout of prime ministerial musical chairs as of late, though without the excuse of regular Dalek incursions. If I've timed this right, then this video is going out the day of the Makerfield by-election, which, if it results in a victory for Labour candidate Andy Burnham, will likely lead to a leadership election that will usher in yet another new Prime Minister, who would be the ninth since 2005, when Doctor Who returned to our screens. To celebrate, if that's the right word, we're going to look at all the Prime Ministers of Doctor Who since the revival, how terrible they almost all are, and what brought them down. We're also going to be counting them, with 9 as the magic number, to answer the question, which country is more politically unstable, the UK of Doctor Who or the UK of real life? First, a couple of ground rules because it's Doctor Who, so there have to be. Number 1, we're only looking at the TV shows. No comics, no books, no Big Finish, no computer games, no comic relief specials, no EastEnders crossovers, only the main series and its spin-offs since 2005. Second, we're only doing modern day Prime Ministers, who are meant to be in power between 2005 and 2026, to keep the comparison to real life fair. So no historical Prime Ministers, no future Prime Ministers, no alternate timeline Prime Ministers, no parallel universe Prime Ministers, and no one who fits all of those descriptions. Looking at you, Emperor Winston Churchill of the Holy Roman Empire. And finally, we're only going for full Prime Ministers. There is an acting Prime Minister we'll get to fairly quickly, but I'm not going to count him. The UK hasn't really had an acting Prime Minister since 2005, unless you count Dominic Raab when Boris Johnson was dying of COVID, but even if we did, they probably wouldn't get counted in the official list, so we're just sticking to the main ones here. With all that out the way, let's begin. We don't have to wait long for our first Prime Minister, who shows up in Season 1, Episode 4, Aliens of London, though he doesn't make much of an impression. If you're of the opinion that the only good Prime Minister is a dead Prime Minister, then this guy will be to your taste, because when we meet him he's already been killed by the Slitheen, a crime syndicate family of farting green aliens from the planet Raxacoricofallapatorius. By the way, I'm not going to be able to explain the plot of every one of these episodes in detail as we go through, because we'd be here all week, so if you're unfamiliar with Doctor Who, just try to hang on and enjoy the ride. Some might say that this unnamed dead PM is an unfair comparison to Tony Blair when it comes to measuring political instability, because Blair had already been in power for 9 years by 2006, whereas we don't know how long this random guy was around for. However, we can actually solve that quite easily, because this guy is meant to be a Blair stand-in. Literally, he was meant to be a lookalike, but in the end the actor didn't really look that much like him. There's a bunch of references to Blair-esque things. Harriet Jones, MP for Flydale North, mentions not being one of the Babes, a reference to the Blair Babes, and there's a couple jabs at weapons of mass destruction.
Our inspectors have searched the sky above our heads. Then they have found massive weapons of destruction, capable of being deployed within 45 seconds.
What? Blair is also the only Prime Minister since 2005 as far as I can remember who is referenced in a modern TV episode, by Mickey when they go to a parallel universe. So we can be pretty confident that this is, for all intents and purposes, Tony Blair, and therefore we can assume he was Prime Minister for the same length of time. Unlike Blair, however, as far as we know anyway, this PM was killed by aliens in 2006. Don't ask me to explain the timeline, by the way, it's really not worth it. The Slitheen flay their victims and wear their skins as suits. If that sounds too horrific for a family show, might I direct you to the Sarah Jane Adventures, the children's show where the Slitheen are the recurring villains, and the first implication that a child has been flayed comes in episode 2. But they don't do this to Tony Blair, presumably because he's not fat enough, and they can only fit in fat people's skin. Imagine the audition process for these actors must have been awkward. Instead, Joseph Green, chairman of the Parliamentary Standards Committee for the Monitoring of Sugar in Exported Confectionery, becomes acting Prime Minister. Though of course the real Joseph Green is dead and his skin is being worn by Joe Crasser Felfoch Pasamir de Slitheen. As PMs go, Green is a pretty bad one, trying to start World War III in order to turn Earth into a nuclear slag heap that can be sold off as scrap, but given that he's only ever acting PM, he doesn't count towards our list. The next PM is someone we've already mentioned, Harriet Jones. She also appears in the Aliens of London World War III two-parter, where she helps the Doctor and Rose defeat the Slitheen. In the aftermath of Downing Street being blown up, Jones ends up becoming Prime Minister, with the Doctor remarking that she will go on to serve 3 terms, which in the UK probably means somewhere between 12 to 15 years. Harriet Jones doesn't get to serve those 3 terms, however. She returns in the 2005 Christmas special, when the Sycorax appear and demand half the world's population as slaves, or else they'll use blood control to get everyone with the A-positive blood type to throw themselves off tall buildings. In the end, the Doctor comes in to sort things out, showing the Sycorax's threats to be empty, defeating their leader in a duel and then killing him with a Satsuma. As the Sycorax ship is leaving, Harriet Jones orders Torchwood, remember that name, to blow it up, which makes the Doctor angry. In what is quite a good setup for the whole Time Lord victorious thing in David Tennant's first ever episode, though it wasn't planned that way, the Doctor intervenes to bring down Harriet Jones's government by initiating a health scare, thus altering the timeline in a way that's going to have serious consequences. The episode ends with a vote of no confidence apparently on the way. Now, here we have our first gap in Prime Ministers, because the next one to arrive is Harold Saxon. Saxon, who is actually the Master, is from a completely new political party and gets voters, including Sharon Osbourne,
I'm voting Saxon. He can tick my box any day.
McFly,
Vote Saxon! You're Harry!
and Anne Widdecombe.
I think Mr. Saxon is exactly what this country needs. He's a very fine man. And he's handsome too.
Vote for him through subliminal messaging with the da-da-da-dum double heartbeat of a Time Lord. Do try to keep up. Anyway, for our purposes, placing Harold Saxon in the timeline is made especially difficult because he forges his backstory and uses the Archangel network to subliminally reinforce it. However, if Vivian Rook is correct, he first actually appears immediately after Harriet Jones's downfall and only becomes Prime Minister 18 months later, which means that there must have been a Prime Minister in between Jones and Saxon. As a Prime Minister, Saxon is not the greatest. He gasses his cabinet, murders a journalist, and enslaves the Earth using the Toclophane, a fleet of robots created from the cannibalized, infantilized last remnants of humanity at the end of the universe. He also doesn't serve as Prime Minister for very long. Although he has a year in power, it later gets erased when the Great Times a Few Trillion Grandfather paradox winds back time to before the Toclophane arrive. So we're up to 3 PMs who actually appear and one who presumably exists. Before we get to our fourth named Prime Minister, Brian Greene, we're going to need to cover the gap between Harold Saxon and Greene's first appearance in Torchwood Children of Earth. We know that Greene doesn't immediately succeed Saxon because in the series' 4 episodes Stolen Earth, when Earth gets stolen and teleported halfway across the universe by the Daleks, the Prime Minister is in a plane at the time and is apparently killed. This unnamed Prime Minister even kind of has a name, Aubrey Fairchild, because he was gonna have more of a role in this two-parter in earlier drafts, as shown in the writer's tale, where he would have welcomed some Daleks to Earth who would then have exterminated him. As is the nature of Doctor Who, this unnamed character, who never appeared in any episode, has since been featured in a spin-off book, and his name was later used by Russell T Davies for a different character in The Next Doctor. While we have no way of knowing if another Prime Minister should be crowned between Fairchild and Brian Greene, they're close enough together in the timeline and Greene is established enough in Children of Earth that I'm happy to assume otherwise. This bit will contain spoilers for Torchwood Children of Earth, which I'm mentioning here where I haven't before because I'm going to recommend you go and watch it. Obviously I also recommend Doctor Who, but that goes without saying. Children of Earth is worth watching even if you haven't seen any other Torchwood or indeed any Doctor Who. It's just that good. It's on iPlayer, it's like 5 episodes, go watch it. Now that you've presumably gone and done that, let's talk about Brian Greene. In a series where 2 of our 5-ish PMs so far have been aliens, it's impressive that Greene comes off as the slimiest. He's Prime Minister during the Children of Earth crisis, when mysterious aliens known only as the 456 demand 10% of Earth's children, or they'll wipe out the human race, which, what with the Sycorax, is becoming a running theme. It transpires that they want children because they produce a chemical which makes the 456
feel good. The chemicals are good.
They're like drugs.
Brian Greene agrees to all this, tries to assassinate Torchwood to cover up their involvement in a previous deal with the 456, uses the military to forcibly get children for the aliens under the guise of a vaccination program, decides that none of the cabinet's children or grandchildren will be included, but that the long-suffering civil servant Peter Capaldi will have to sacrifice his kids so that the government is seen to have suffered, then goes along with the Home Secretary's proposal that the 10% will be taken from the lowest performing pupils, who she thinks would just go on to become criminals and benefit scroungers anyway. In the end, the disaster is averted by Torchwood, though not without some horrendous things like Jack sacrificing his grandson, and Peter Capaldi killing his daughters and himself. It's pretty dark. Brian Greene at the end suggests that they cover it all up, but the Home Secretary, Denise Riley, reveals she has recorded his conversations, and it's implied that she's going to blackmail him to stand down and that she'll take over as PM. So, once again, Doctor Who is not the finest showcase of our political leadership. In keeping with the dark and depressing tone of Children of Earth, the implication that even though Green gets some comeuppance, his successor will be someone just as bad as him is also pretty bleak. Though, if I were ranking them, I'd probably put Riley higher just because Green is pathetic as well as evil. We don't actually know if Riley takes over, and the wiki seems to think Brian Greene lasts at least a little bit longer after Children of Earth because he appears in a comic, but we're not counting that, so it's likely that Denise Riley does become Prime Minister. That brings our total to 4 definite Prime Ministers, 3 implied Prime Ministers, and an acting Prime Minister, and we've only got up to 2009. It's looking pretty good for the real world by contrast, but our next named Prime Minister in Doctor Who isn't going to be until 2021. It seems that whereas Russell T Davies liked featuring modern Prime Ministers as characters within the story, Stephen Moffat was not so keen, preferring to have Winston Churchill as a recurring character. Chris Chibnall introduced a painful Trump parody, Jack Robertson, but didn't get around to a Prime Minister until 2021's New Year's Eve special, Revolution of the Daleks. This leaves a 12-year gap where any number of Prime Ministers could have succeeded Denise Riley, but we have no evidence one way or another, if we're discounting the endless comics, books, and Big Finish stories. We can even try to narrow the 12-year gap by filling some of it with the new Prime Minister herself, Jo Patterson, because we see her election in Revolution of the Daleks. She works with Jack Robertson to use a destroyed Dalek as a blueprint for a new security force, which predictably turns on her and exterminates her. So, once again, we're back to Prime Ministers whose tenures are measured in days rather than decades. Patterson remained Chibnall's only Prime Minister, with our next one arriving in 2023's The Giggle, written by the returning
Russell the Davies,
meaning that all but one PM were under his showrunnership. This PM, whose name is given as Edward Lorne Bridges, though I don't think that's in the TV show, only the novelisation, appears in one scene of the episode under the influence of the Toymaker's giggle thing that made everyone think that they're right, proudly admitting that he doesn't care about the Electorate.
What do I care? I mean, seriously, why should I care about you?
Donna drops a biting piece of satire
No change there, then.
that implies Bridges has been PM for at least a little while, so it's not inconceivable that he took over straight after Patterson. Our final Prime Minister is from a spin-off with far too many thes, The War Between the Land and the Sea, which came out in December 2025, so perhaps more relevant spoilers for this since it's only been out 6 months at the time of recording. Harry Shaw follows in the by now well-established pattern of Doctor Who Prime Ministers in being both bloodthirsty and cowardly, wiping out the Sea Devils with a manufactured virus while also ordering the execution of his ally to cover up said virus, not to mention being a puppet of his donors, who he doesn't actually like. He's still alive at the end of the series, and we haven't had any Doctor Who since the spin-off, so we have no reason to think he's been replaced. So there we have it. Our final total is 7 definite Prime Ministers, with one unnamed one who must exist, Aubrey Fairchild, and 2 others who are very likely to exist, Denise Riley and the presumed interim between Harriet Jones and Harold Saxon, which brings us to 10. By contrast, the real-world UK has only had 8 going on 9, which makes us slightly less politically unstable than Doctor Who. Which, as a reminder, is a world where 3 of those Prime Ministers were killed by aliens, 1 turned out to be an alien, 2 were involved in negotiations with potential alien invasion/wars, another had his mind altered by an incomprehensible cosmic entity, and 1 had to resign because of a health scare. Oh, but she was later killed by aliens, unless you believe Russell's headcanon that she was actually saved at the last minute, because technically we never actually saw her die. Compare this to our own Prime Minister's downfalls: a failed war, the global financial crisis, Brexit, Partygate, a self-inflicted bond market meltdown, just being a bit rubbish, and most recently, just being a bit rubbish. Hopefully Andy Burnham or Wes Streeting mix things up and get miniaturized by the Master or something. Until that happens, thanks for watching, and goodbye. Preferring to have Winston